Good morning. I hope you're all doing well, and apologies to all those who showed up at 6:20 to learn today. Okay, July 4th. Davening started a little late, so the shir was a little late. And thank you to Max Shapiro for covering the shir in person. For the next week, the shir will continue in person, but I'll be recording the shir not live. Okay, so here we go. So we are on Tzadi Zayin Amud Aleph 97a. A1, and the Gemara, until now, Rava suggested that that what was going on in our Mishnah, we had machlokas between Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda. Rameir said that whether the tefillin are new or old, you're allowed to save them, and Rabbi Yehuda said only the old ones are you allowed to save. And the understanding was, the explanation of Rava was that what they were arguing about was whether or not a person would bother making a kameya, a amulet, with something that looks like tefillin. In other words, it's a lot of effort. It's not so typical, and it's a lot of effort to make something look like tefillin. And so Rabbi Meir said, we would therefore say that whether it's new or old, even if it's new and you don't see any of the imprints of the knots of the tefillin on it, you would still say it's probably tefillin. And Rabbi Yehuda was concerned that if it's a new one, meaning it doesn't have the knots imprinted into it. Right now, the tefillin boxes don't have any knots, but you see the tefillin box and it looks new in the sense that it doesn't have any knots imprinted on it, you'd have to be concerned that maybe someone went ahead and was actually making a kameya, an amulet in the shape of tefillin, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to say that because maybe it is a kameya. That was what they were arguing about. Okay, but now, however, the Gemara is going to change that because we have a statement from someone who taught a brisa which really upends that. So the Gemara says, "V'hashta de Tanya Avud Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak." Now that the father of Shmuel, the son of Rav Yitzchak, taught the following brisa, which indicates that that interpretation was incorrect. What is the brisa? Elu hein yishanos. This is what it means by an old one. Okay. Until now, we just thought an old one meant that you could see it was once used for tefillin, but he says no. Kol sheyesh ben ritzuos umikusharos. An old one is that has straps and they're knotted with the proper tefillin knots. Right. So tefillin, doesn't just have straps attached to it. It has certain knots. It has knots in the back of the shel rosh. It has a knot on there's a knot by the yud, the knot by the shel yad over there as well. So that's what a new one is. That's what an old one is that has knots. Chadashos, what it's a new one. Yesh ben ritzuos umikusharos. It has the straps. The straps are put into the tefillin, but it's not actually knotted. Okay, so dekuli alma lo tarchinish. Everyone's going to agree, meaning you can't suggest that someone's going to think that when a person went ahead and made a kamiya, made an amulet, and actually had straps tied into it, the way that tefillin are. So meaning even a new one has straps put into it. No one's going to go ahead and make an amulet that goes that far. It's one thing to make it like that box shape, but to go ahead and to put straps in it which look like tefillin, no way. So therefore, what we have to reinterpret the machlokas, and what the way the Gemara is interpreting it right now is that Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda, they're arguing about the following. They're arguing about right. So again, let's review what's happening over here. We're talking about a person finding tefillin in a public domain and they want to bring it into a private domain. Now, you can't carry because there's no eruv. We're potentially talking about a biblical violation of carrying on Shabbos. So what is allowed over here, that even though a person typically doesn't wear tefillin, and whether a person fulfills their mitzvah of wearing tefillin on Shabbos or doesn't is a sidebar for now, but even though a person typically doesn't wear tefillin on Shabbos, there is a special dispensation to save the tefillin. The question is, how far is that dispensation going to go? If it's regular tefillin, you could just put them on regularly. Okay, since that's the way you regularly wear it on a weekday, Chachamim would say, okay, so even though you typically don't wear tefillin on Shabbos, but you're wearing it, it's similar to me wearing a shirt in a public domain. That's not considered carrying. That's what you're wearing it. So similarly, even though you typically don't wear tefillin, if I'm wearing them, it's going to be okay. So everyone agrees it has to be done like a normal wearing fashion. So Rameir says, at the end of the day, whether they are knotted or not knotted, if they're knotted, I just put them on regular. If they're not knotted, I could go ahead and make a loose and temporary knot. A loose and temporary knot is not problematic. No pun intended there. Okay, that is okay. That is okay. You're allowed to make a loose and temporary knot, and therefore a person could put on tefillin. It's not exactly identical, but Rabbi Yehuda would hold that no. Rabbi Yehuda holds that that since a person, it's not the normal way to wear tefillin on Shabbos. It's not the normal way to wear tefillin on a weekday with a loose and temporary knot. Normally it has a very tight knot. The tefillin knots are very well done. They're actually like an expertise. You have to keep, people teach how to make the tefillin knots. Therefore, Yehuda says it's not the way you're normally wearing it on Shabbos, and therefore they can't be worn. That's the answer. That's the explanation of the machlokas now between Rameh and Rabbi Yehuda. So again, everyone agrees regular tefillin you could wear if you find on Shabbos to save them. You bring them back inside into the private domain. But Rabbi Yehuda says, Rameir says, if you found tefillin which weren't knotted, you could still make a loose and temporary knot. Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to do so because that's not the way you wear it during the week. So where it says, what I don't understand, at the end of the day, you could still make bows. You can make bows, okay. That's already like something which is a little bit more similar to the knot they're wearing on Shabbos, and therefore it should be okay. So Rav Chisda says the fact that Rabbi Yehuda still does not allow you to take the tefillin out with a bow, zosumeres aniva psul of tefillin. That clearly means that a bow is not valid for tefillin, or else you would be able to make a bow, and a bow could be made on Shabbos. Abaya says no. The reason Rabbi Yehuda does not allow wearing a bow, making a bow, is not because it's not valid for tefillin. Maybe it is valid for tefillin. The reason Rabbi Yehuda doesn't allow you making a bow when you find tefillin on Shabbos, which are not knotted, is because Rabbi Yehuda tamei. Rabbi Yehuda is consistent with his own reasoning. To Amar aniva kshir mal yasahi. He holds that a bow is a proper knot. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda holds that on Shabbos you would not even be allowed to make a bow. Right? That means that many of the shoes that I wear with laces, you would not be allowed to wear. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's the reason. Meaning, Rabbi Yehuda would hold making a bow during the week would be fine for tefillin. The reason he doesn't allow you taking these tefillin on Shabbos is because if you had to make a bow, okay, you would end up having something. You'd end up doing something which is a violation of one of the 39 prohibitions of making a knot on Shabbos. He considers a bow to be a knot. So Gemara says further, time So basically, according to Abaye, what you're saying is that the reason that he doesn't allow it is because a bow is a proper knot. If it wasn't the case, Anav whoever you would allow making bows on tefillin straps, that doesn't add up because Amar Rabbi Yehuda Berei Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas Mishmei de Rav Kesher Shel Tefillin. Okay, it said that the knot of tefillin halach l'Moshe Sinai. The halacha that making the knot of tefillin is something which is halach l'Moshe Sinai. It's something which you can't mess around with. In other words, it's a very particular way. Rav Nachman v'no yehen levar, the ornamentation must go outward. A lot of discussion about what exactly those words mean. Some understand that there's a shin on the tefillin, and you have to have a shin on the tefillin, like it's drawn on the tefillin, but it has to be bolet, it has to go outwards. Some say that's what it's referring to. Some say that it means that you have to be able to see the knot that's over here. Some say you have to see the knot that's on the shel yad. One way or another, the point is that there is a very specific way of making the knot. And how could you say that making a bow is okay? A bow is not going to have that same type of knot. And so how could that be? So where it says the Anav King share the two. No, so you make a bow which is similar to a regular knot. Okay, so I don't know enough about making ties and knots. It took me a while to learn how to tie my shoes. But the bottom line is that if you make a bow which is similar to a knot, that would still be in fulfillment of the Halacha Mishmei Sinai, and therefore Abaye's answer could stand. That Abaye is saying that the reason that Rabbi Yehuda does not allow you making a bow on Shabbos, and the reason therefore he would say that a new pair of tefillin, meaning according to this interpretation, tefillin which have the straps but do not have a knot, the reason Rabbi Yehuda says you can't take it out on Shabbos because the only way to take it on Shabbos would be making a bow, and Rabbi Yehuda does not allow making a bow on Shabbos because he holds that is asur. Now, halacha l'maisa, practically speaking, you are allowed to make a bow on Shabbos. You can't make a permanent knot or even a knot which is considered temporary, but to go ahead and make a bow would be okay according to the way we paskin. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you'd have to wear slip-on shoes on Shabbos, but that's not the way we paskin. Okay, now we go on a tangent once we're talking about tefillin, and we are talking about piskei din halachos from Rav. Rav Chisda Rav halakech tefillin. A person who buys tefillin from someone who's not an expert in the laws of tefillin. Bodek, you have to examine shtaim shel yad ve'echad shel rosh. O shtaim shel rosh ve'echad shel yad. You have to examine three tefillin. So either you do two of the hand ones and one of the head ones, or two of the head ones and one of the arm ones. The Gemara asks now, let's try to understand where's this number come from? Manavshach. Either way, if the person that you're buying from is one person, in other words, it's one scribe, okay? Livdok, examine, oshal shel yad, oshal shel rosh. Either examine 3 arm tefillin or 3 head tefillin. If you're purchasing from more than one person, in other words, let's say you're going to a person, a salesman, right, who buys tefillin from a bunch of people, then kol chad v'chad libay bedika. So it doesn't help that I go ahead and I looked at 3 of them. At the end of the day, if he buys from a whole bunch of different people, I have to check each one that I'm going to buy from. But they're going to buy because they're coming from different people. So really, the purchaser, okay, is bought it from one person. And you have to go ahead and demonstrate that both the shal yad and the shal rosh are okay. In other words, it's not enough to say the shal yads are good. It's not enough to say the shal roshes are good. You have to see both to make sure that they are good. And therefore, what you need to do is see 3 in total, because 3 makes a chazaka. And then the way to do so is that at least two are going to be of one, of the shal yad, and 1 are going to be the shal rosh, or 2 of the shal rosh to 1 of the shal yad. And therefore, you have an overarching chazaka. But you would not be allowed to just check 1, because maybe the other one is not good. Ask Gemara, Eini about Tani Rabba Bar Shmuel b'tefillin bodek shal yad v'shal rosh. So he says, Rabba Bar Shmuel taught that when it comes to tefillin, you examine 3 arm and 3 head. My love, Oshal shal yad, Oshal shal rosh. Doesn't that not sound like he's saying 3 armed tefillin or 3 head tefillin? The Gemara says, lo, shalosh, you examine 3. And the hen shal yad, some of them are tefillin, but hen shal rosh, and some of them are head tefillin. Okay, ask the Gemara further. Vatani Rav Kahana b'tefillin bodek shtayim shal yad v'shal rosh. Rav Kahana taught a brisa which says, when it comes to tefillin, you check 2 tefillin, 1 armed tefillin and 1 head tefillin. So why did Rav say 3? Here we have a brisa which says all you have to do is check 2. The Gemara says, Hamani Rebbe to Amr b'trei zirmnei havdi chazak. Okay, so there's this machlokas, this debate throughout the entire Shas about how many times you have to do something in order to establish a chazaka. Chazaka is basically saying that you've established something which is demonstrating this is like consistent. This is like this is you've established that there's probably a better English word which I'm not thinking of right now, but basically it shows like there's consistency and you can rely on that consistency. So the classic opinion is that 3 times. 3 times makes a chazaka. If you do something 3 times, then like if you see a pattern happening 3 times, then the pattern's going to, you could assume, I should say, the pattern's going to continue. However, Rebbe holds that you don't need to do something doesn't have to happen 3 times. After 2 times, it would be sufficient. And so that's why this brisa said all you have to do is check 2. 1 shal yad, 1 shal rosh, because it's the opinion of Rebbe. Where it says, Rebbe, if it's Rebbe, ema seifa. What about the end of that ruling of Rav Kahana, that brisa, who said, v'chem b'tzeves hasheni, and so with the second bundle, v'chem b'tzeves hashlishi, and so with the third bundle, right? So Rav Kahana goes on to talk about bundles, not just individual tefillin, and he says, check the second bundle, then you have to check the third bundle. So what's going on? The Rebbe, we're 9783, shlishis mi yislei. Why do we have to check the third bundle? Right? According to Rebbe, once you check 2 bundles, you're good. So Gemara says, Mo de Rebbe b'tzvasim, Rebbe agrees with bundles, right? Because when you talk about bundles, there's no way it was bought for 1 person. So when it comes to bundles, you have to go ahead and check more than, you can't just rely on a chazaka, because when you go to a person who's selling like a huge amount of tefillin, they're selling them in bundles, they have that many, and then you can't just assume, then you have to go and check each one. So Gemara says, so if you have to check each one, then why does it say check the second and third? It should say fourth as well, and the fifth as well, because what you're saying is that each bundle is bought from a different sofer, and each of them are a different person. You have to check each one. So Gemara says, that's true. The reason it says 3 is to exclude it from the laws of chazaka, and really 4th and 5th as well. In other words, the reason that brisa says check 3 is exactly to say 2, which is, again, we're suggesting this brisa is going within the opinion of Rebbe, who would normally say 2 is okay. The brisa says 3 to say that 2, meaning a regular chazaka, is not okay, because each bundle we have to assume is bought from a different sofer, and that's exactly why it says 3. Not because 3 therefore establishes the chazaka, but to say 3 because we are not going to rely on a chazaka over here in this case. Okay, says the Gemara mitzvah. Now we go back to our Mishnah. The Mishnah said mitzvah tzvasim o krichos. So the Gemara says we find it in heaps or in bundles. Now what's the difference? My tzvasim, my krichos. What's the difference between a heap and a bundle? Am Rabbi Yehuda, Am Rav, hein tzvasim, hein krichos. The Gemara says they're really the same thing. There's a slight difference, technical difference. Tzvasim, zuze. Heaps means that they are pairs. They're tied together, shal yad, shal rosh, and krichos, dechrich, and tuva. Bundles will have many tefillin tied together, not tied as individual pairs. But the bottom line is, the Mishnah says you find a whole bunch of them. What did the Mishnah say? You found a whole bunch of them. So machshech aleim avi, and then you stay with them until dark, and then you bring them back to safety. Okay. So when it says v'mai, why is that? Why do you have to stay with them until dark? Lailinu zug zug, go bring them pair by pair, right? In other words, why is it say when there's a huge pile, you have to wait until dark? Just put on 1 pair and go back. Put on 1 pair and go to the private domain. Put on 1 pair, go back to the private domain. So Amar Yitzchak Rabbi Yehuda l'dim afresh le'minei da'aba. My father said, Rabbi Yitzchak the son of Yehuda explained it to me. Kol she'ilu machnis and zug zug. We're talking about a case where if you bring in pair by pair, v'chalos kom shkias lechama, and you finish before sunset. Sorry, I got interrupted. I'm going to go back a line. So Amar Yitzchak Breder Yehuda l'didim afresh le'minei da'aba kol she'ilu machnis and zug zug v'chalos kom shkias lechama. A person were to bring in tefillin pair by pair, it would take so long that they would finish after already Shabbos is over. In that case, if they would do it, if there's so few that if you were to go back and forth, you'd be able to finish before Shabbos is over. Then machnisan zug. Then you bring them in pair by pair, below. But if it's not possible, there's so many that if you go back and forth, it would already Shabbos be over. Then there's no point, there's no reason for this dispensation, for this leniency, and therefore machshech alei mavi, and you may as well just stay until dark, because anyway, some of them you have to bring after dark, so you may as well just stay till after dark and then bring them all at that point. Okay, the Gemara then said, the Mishnah then said, the Mishnah said, in a time of danger, you just cover the tefillin and then you leave. So Batanya, we have a brisa which conflicts with the Mishnah. The brisa says, in a time of danger, you transport them pachos amos, by walking less than 4 amos at a time. So on the one hand, our Mishnah said that in a time of danger, you cover them. We have the brisa which says that in a time of danger, you walk less than 4 amos, stop. Walk less than 4 amos, stop, right? Which again is, biblically, you will not be in violation. Rabbinically, we typically don't do that, right? If you're standing in a public domain, we don't say carry something by walking and stopping. In special cases, we allow that to happen. So on the one hand, we're saying b'sakana, you do that, walk less than 4 amos, and then at the same time we have our Mishnah which says, in a time of danger, you cover them and leave. So Amarav lokasha, there's no contradiction. Havazakanas nachri, the ruling our Mishnah which says cover them and walk away, that's when there are idolaters who want to go, will kill you if they see you with tefillin. Then you don't risk your life, you cover them so they don't get desecrated, and you did your thing, you walk away. Habasakanas listim, the ruling that says you're allowed to walk 4 amos, is if you're in a slightly dangerous area, and there's a concern, no one's going to kill, we don't have the same level of danger, and therefore what you're allowed to do is, let me say this better. The danger over here is it's not the danger, the way the Rishonim understand, it's not the dangers that they're going to hurt you, the dangers that they're going to desecrate the tefillin. So in such a case, you could walk for amos, and that way you would save the tefillin. But the bottom line is, we're not talking about a case where you are in danger. 97b1, Amar le'abaya b'may ukim t'mas nisan. What case do you establish our Mishnah? A case where you're concerned that non-Jews who are having these decrees against the Jews are going to see the person wearing tefillin and they could kill them. Hema safe if that's the case. What about the end of the Mishnah, which said Rav Shimon Omer nos lechaver v'chaver lechavero? Rav Shimon said, in such a case, if you find them, you give them to your friend gives them back to you, then you give them back to him, and basically that way, no one's really carrying 4 amos. So Gemara says, Kol sheken d'afsha milsa. If you do that, it's going to be like so incredibly evident that you're doing something. It's going to attract the attention of the idolaters, who are then going to go, for sure you're going to get in trouble. So Gemara says, no, chasir machzor rachitani. The Mishnah is missing a couple of words, but medvar more. This is the way to read the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that when are you supposed to cover the tefillin? That's when there's a concern of idolaters who are going to execute you. In a case where there's danger posed by highwaymen, then the Tanakama says, then you should transport them by walking less than 4 amos. And to that, Rav Shimon said, don't do the leniency of walking less than 4 amos, but rather give it to your friend to you, your friend to you, and that would be the best way to carry it out of the public domain and keep the tefillin in a place of safety. Have a great day and a good Shabbos.